On a scorching summer afternoon, I sat cross-legged on my worn-out couch, grading piano assignments while the old ceiling fan hummed lazily above me. The apartment was small but cozy, filled with the scent of fresh coffee and sheet music scattered around. My 10-year-old son, Max, burst into the room, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "Mom, look," he exclaimed, holding up his latest science project, a homemade volcano. He had poured baking soda and vinegar into the crater, and the red foam was bubbling over, spilling onto the table. I smiled, adjusting my glasses. "That's amazing, Max. Mr. Lewis is going to be really impressed." Just as he beamed with pride, my phone rang. The screen flashed Mom, our weekly scheduled call. With a sigh, I answered. "Hey, Mom. Emma, darling." My mother's voice carried its usual enthusiasm. "Uncle Peter's wedding is finally set. Next month, in Miami, at this stunning resort. You and Max are coming, right?" I hesitated. As a high school music teacher, I barely made enough to cover rent, let alone afford a luxurious trip. "Mom, I don't know if we'll cover the expenses," she interrupted quickly. "It's important that the whole family is there. Your sister, Olivia, and her husband are coming too. And of course, Ethan will be there." At the mention of Olivia, my stomach twisted. My perfect, successful older sister, married to a thriving entrepreneur, living in an upscale neighborhood, sending her 12-year-old son, Carter, to an elite private school. Meanwhile, I had struggled for the last 5 years as a single mom after my ex-husband, Eric, walked out on us. I exhaled. "All right, we'll be there." After hanging up, I collapsed into the couch, already dreading the reunion. I loved my mother, but she had always made it clear. Olivia was the golden child, the one who made the right choices. I, on the other hand, was the dreamer who had wasted potential by choosing teaching over a more practical career. "Are we really going to Florida?" Max's voice cut through my thoughts. "Yes, kiddo, we are." His face lit up. "Can we go to the beach?" I forced a smile. "Of course." "And Carter will be there?" His excitement dimmed slightly. "Yes, he will." Max bit his lip. "He always makes fun of me." I squeezed his hand. "People like Carter think what you own matters more than who you are. But we know better, right?" Max nodded, but the flicker of doubt in his eyes stung. The next morning, as I was making breakfast, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Olivia. "Mom told me you're coming. Carter is looking forward to playing with Max." I stared at the words. Knowing full well Carter didn't play with Max, he belittled him. A few days later, Mom called again. "Emma, I've made all the travel arrangements," she said over the phone. "Olivia and her family are flying first class from New York. Your father and I are flying too." One swallowed. "And us?" A brief pause. "I think it would be best if you and Max took the bus." I gripped the phone tighter. "The bus? Yes, dear. It's much cheaper, and I know money's been tight for you. This way, you won't have to worry about the expense." A 12-hour bus ride, while Olivia and the rest of the family soared in comfort above the clouds. "Of course." "All right, Mom," I said quietly. "We'll take the bus." That evening, I sat Max down. "So, about the Florida trip, we'll be going by bus." His face scrunched in confusion. "But that's really long, right?" "Yes, but we'll see the scenery, read, and play games. It'll be fun." Max tilted his head. "How is Carter getting there?" I hesitated. "They're flying." He frowned. "Why aren't we flying?" I forced a light shrug. "Because buses are an adventure." Max thought for a moment, then nodded slightly. But I saw the disappointment in his eyes. The morning of our departure arrived. The bus terminal was located inside the airport, where the whole family was meeting before their flights. As we entered the lobby, Olivia stood poised in a designer outfit, her husband Ethan beside her, scrolling through his phone. Carter, immersed in his expensive tablet, barely glanced up. "There you are," Olivia said, her tone vaguely dismissive. "Our check-in is about to start." I nodded. "Morning." "We've been so busy," she said, with that practiced air of effortless success. "Ethan just closed a major deal, and Carter just got accepted into an elite robotics program." I forced a smile. "That's great." Carter barely looked up. "Hey." Max offered a small hi, his posture stiff. Mom turned to me. "Your bus leaves at 9, right?" "Yes." "Good. That'll get you there just in time for the wedding." Then Olivia smirked. "Why are you taking the bus?" "Flights are so much faster." Before I could answer, Mom chuckled. "Well, business class wasn't exactly in Emma's budget. I felt the heat rise in my face. Olivia's eyes flickered with amusement. Carter wrinkled his nose. Buses stink. We took one for a school trip, and it smelled like feet. Ethan let out a short laugh. Olivia joined in, shaking her head as if this was all harmless fun. Max stiffened beside me. I squeezed his hand and forced a steady voice. Come on, Max. Let's head to the terminal. As we turned away, I heard Olivia's voice, dripping with faux politeness. Enjoy your bus ride, Emma. I didn't look back. No one was there to see us off. We boarded the bus, the worn-out seats a stark contrast to the plush first-class lounges. My family was probably enjoying. I turned to Max, determined to make the best of it. All right, kiddo, let's make this an adventure. I had barely opened a book when a voice from the seat next to us spoke. That's a wonderful idea. I turned to see an elderly gentleman with silver hair and kind blue eyes smiling warmly. I'm James, he said, extending his hand. Mind if I join you too? I shook his hand, a strange feeling settling in my chest. Something about this meeting felt significant, and I had no idea how much it would change our lives. The bus rumbled beneath us as we pulled away from the station, heading south toward Florida. Max had his face pressed against the window, watching the city shrink into the distance. His small fingers drummed absently on the armrest, and I could tell he was still thinking about our airport send-off. I leaned closer. You okay, buddy? He hesitated before nodding. Yeah, I guess. I sighed, ruffling his hair. Listen, I know today wasn't easy, but you and I, we make the best of things. Max offered a weak smile. Yeah, adventure, right? Exactly. James, the elderly gentleman we had just met, chuckled beside us. I like that mindset. Life's all about perspective. I glanced at him, curiosity growing. There was something warm about him, something steady. He was dressed simply, in a light linen shirt and a pair of reading glasses perched on his nose. But there was an air of quiet confidence about him. So, what takes you to Florida, James? I asked. He smiled, looking out the window. A bit of work, a bit of pleasure. He glanced back at me. And you? A wedding, I said, shifting in my seat. My uncle is getting married at some big resort. Ah, family gatherings, James mused. They can be complicated. I let out a soft laugh. You have no idea. James gave me a knowing look, but before he could say more, Max tugged on my sleeve. Mom, can I show Mr. James my volcano project? James's face lit up. I'd love that. Max unzipped his backpack and carefully pulled out the homemade volcano, explaining in detail how it worked. As he spoke, his earlier sadness faded, replaced by excitement. James listened intently. That's incredible, Max. You've got a sharp mind. Ever thought about engineering? Max shrugged. I like science, but I also like music. Mom's a music teacher. James turned to me. A pianist? I nodded. And a choir director. I teach at a high school. Music and science, James mused. A powerful combination. Do you compose? Not really, I admitted. I mean, I've dabbled, but nothing serious. You should, James said, leaning back. The world needs more educators who think outside the box. I smiled, though I wasn't sure what to make of his words. There was something about the way he spoke, like he saw more in me than I saw in myself. Hours passed as the bus wound its way south. Max eventually dozed off, his head resting against my shoulder. The steady hum of the road mixed with the occasional murmur of conversation from other passengers. James and I talked on and off, weaving through topics ranging from music to travel to life's unexpected turns. He had an easy way about him, like he had seen enough of the world to understand its rhythms. At one point, he pulled out a small notebook and jotted something down. I glanced at the page, catching glimpses of musical notes. You write music? I asked. James smiled. Here and there. More of a hobby these days. Before I could ask more, the bus slowed for a rest stop. The driver announced a 30-minute break, and passengers began shuffling off. Stretch your legs? James asked. I nodded, gently nudging Max awake. Come on, kiddo. Let's get some fresh air. The rest stop was small, a roadside diner, and a gas station tucked alongside the highway. The sun hung low in the sky, painting everything in golden hues. James offered to grab us some snacks while Max and I sat at a picnic table. My son was quiet, stirring his juice with a straw. What's on your mind? I asked. Max hesitated. Do you think Carter's gonna be mean again? I exhaled, choosing my words carefully. I don't know, Max. But no matter what, you don't have to let him decide how you feel about yourself. Max frowned. But it's not fair. Grandma and Aunt Olivia always act like he's better. I wrapped an arm around him. You and I both know that's not true. People like them measure worth by things. But real worth? That's in who you are. Max nodded slowly. I knew the words weren't a perfect fix, but maybe they planted a seed. James returned a few minutes later, setting a bottle of water and a pack of crackers in front of Max. Fuel for the journey, he said with a wink. Max grinned. Thanks, Mr. James. James took a seat across from us. You know, Max, people like your cousin, they often act that way because they're insecure. Sometimes, the ones who put others down are the ones most afraid of being small themselves. Max thought about that for a moment, then took a sip of his juice. So, Carter's scared? James smiled. Maybe not scared, but he wants to feel important. And sometimes, making others feel small is the only way some people know how to do that. Max nodded, filing the thought away. Back on the bus, the sky outside darkened into deep blues and purples. Max curled up beside me, drifting back to sleep. James was silent for a while, lost in thought. Then, after what felt like hours, he finally spoke. Emma, can I ask you something? I glanced at him. Sure. Have you ever wanted something more? The question caught me off guard. What do you mean? James gestured vaguely. Beyond the day-to-day, beyond just getting by. I hesitated. I mean, I love teaching. I love music. But I guess, yeah, sometimes I wish I could do something bigger. James nodded, as if he had expected my answer. I thought so. I furrowed my brow. Why? James reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek, black business card. He handed it to me, and as I turned it over, my breath caught in my throat. James Whitmore, CEO, Crescendo Innovations. Crescendo Innovations. One of the leading companies in music education and technology. I looked up at him, stunned. You, James smiled. I didn't want to bring it up too soon, but after hearing you talk about your students, your passion, I think you'd be a great fit for a project we're working on. My heart pounded. A project? He nodded. An initiative to bring innovative music programs to schools across the country. We need people who understand both music and education. I gripped the card, my mind spinning. You don't have to decide now, James said, his tone gentle. But think about it. I stared at the card, the weight of possibility settling over me. For years, I had accepted my place content with scraping by, making do. But now, a door I never even considered was swinging open. And for the first time in a long time, I wondered, what if I walked through it? The bus continued its steady journey south, the low hum of the engine filling the quiet night. Max was asleep against my shoulder, his small breaths rhythmic and peaceful. My fingers traced the edges of the business card. James had given me, my mind turning over his words. An opportunity, a real one. I had spent so many years just surviving balancing bills, lesson plans, and Max's needs that I had stopped imagining anything more. But here it was, right in my hands. James must have noticed the turmoil on my face, because he spoke softly, beside me. You don't have to decide tonight, Emma. I exhaled, giving a small nod. It's just unexpected. He smiled knowingly. The best opportunities usually are. I studied him in the dim light. There was something about him, something calm, certain. He carried himself like someone who had spent years learning not just about business, but about people. What made you start Crescendo Innovations? I asked. James leaned back, staring out at the dark landscape passing by the window. I grew up in a small town. We didn't have much, but there was this old piano in my elementary school's music room. The teacher let me stay after class to practice. He smiled faintly. That piano changed my life. Music gave me a way to understand the world. When I got older, I realized how many kids never get that chance. So I decided to change that. I absorbed his words, feeling a strange sense of connection. I understand that, I murmured. Music was always my escape too. James glanced at me. And now you help kids find their own escape. I shrugged. I try. But most of the time, I feel like I'm just keeping my head above water. His expression turned thoughtful. Maybe it's time to do more than just stay afloat. I looked down at Max, his face peaceful in sleep. My heart ached. Could I really take a leap like this? Change everything? Or had I been making myself small for so long that I didn't even know how to think bigger anymore? The next morning, the bus pulled into Miami just as the sun was rising, casting a warm golden glow over the city. I shook Max gently awake. Hey, buddy, we're here, he blinked, rubbing his eyes. Already? I smiled. 12 hours isn't as long when you're asleep. James gathered his small bag, standing with ease despite the long trip. I'll see you at the resort. I nodded. Yeah, thanks for everything. He gave me a knowing look. It's only just beginning. Max and I made our way through the crowded station, the city already alive with early morning traffic. Our resort shuttle was waiting outside, its glossy exterior starkly different from the bus we had just spent half a day on. As we climbed in, I pulled out my phone and saw a message from Olivia. Finally made it? We've been here for days already. Hope the bus wasn't too miserable. I clenched my jaw but didn't respond. There was no point. Olivia thrived on feeling superior, and nothing I said would change that. Instead, I focused on Max, who was staring wide-eyed at the tall palm trees lining the streets. This place looks fancy, he whispered. I chuckled. It is. When we arrived at the resort, my mother was already waiting in the lobby. Her eyes flicked over me quickly, as if assessing whether the bus ride had left me looking appropriately exhausted. You're here, she said, forcing a smile. We are, I replied, matching her energy. Your room's already assigned, she continued. Olivia and Ethan are in one of the oceanfront villas. We put you in one of the side buildings, but it's still nice. Of course. Always the afterthought. Max didn't seem to notice. He was too busy staring at the enormous chandelier hanging from the ceiling, its crystal strands reflecting tiny rainbows across the marble floor. Where's Carter? He asked. Mom hesitated. Oh, he's off with his dad on the jet skis. Max's face fell slightly, but he didn't say anything. I placed a hand on his back. Let's check out our room, okay? That evening, a pre-wedding dinner was held at the resort's open-air restaurant, the ocean breeze carrying the scent of salt and citrus. Max and I arrived a little late, and as we approached the long table where our family was seated, I heard Olivia's voice carrying over the hum of conversation. And of course, Carter is excelling in his program. He's always been ahead of the curve. I rolled my eyes before stepping into view. Sorry we're late. Olivia turned, a perfectly rehearsed smile on her lips. Emma, you made it. I slid into the seat across from her. Yep. Managed to survive the terrible bus ride. Her smile twitched, but before she could respond, a familiar voice interrupted. Emma, Max. I turned to see James approaching, looking effortlessly put together in a crisp button-up and slacks. A ripple of confusion moved through the table. My mother's eyebrows shot up. Olivia, for the first time in her life, was speechless. James pulled out the chair beside me. Mind if I join you? I swallowed my amusement at Olivia's wide-eyed stare. Not at all. He nodded politely at the rest of the family. James Whitmore. My mother's face turned a shade paler. Whitmore? She echoed. James smiled. I run Crescendo Innovations. Emma and I met on the way here. Olivia blinked. You wait. You run Crescendo? I couldn't help but smirk. Olivia was clearly scrambling to process the fact that the man she'd probably have ignored in any other setting was someone important. James turned to me. We should set a time tomorrow to go over details. Before I could respond, Olivia's voice cut in. Details? About what? James sipped his wine. A project Emma might be involved in. The silence that followed was delicious. My mother recovered first, her expression shifting into one of forced warmth. Well, that's wonderful. Isn't it, Olivia? Olivia's smile looked painful. Of course. How? Unexpected. Max, oblivious to the tension, leaned toward James. Mom's a really good teacher, James grinned. I know. The rest of dinner was a blur of polite conversation, but I could feel the shift. Olivia was off balance. My mother was suddenly interested in my career. Ethan, usually disinterested, was eyeing James like he wanted to figure out just how powerful he was. For the first time in years, I wasn't the family embarrassment. I was something else entirely. And I had a feeling Olivia didn't like it. The air was thick with tension by the time dinner ended. My mother was suddenly overly attentive. Olivia was stiff, and Ethan was eyeing James with a mix of curiosity and calculation. I knew exactly what was happening. James had unknowingly thrown a wrench into the delicate hierarchy Olivia had built. For years, I had been the struggling single mom, the one who barely scraped by while Olivia flaunted her perfect life. But now, someone important had taken an interest in me, and Olivia hated that. As we got up from the table, she moved beside me, her voice just low enough for only me to hear. "You never mentioned knowing someone like him," I smirked. "I didn't know I needed to." She let out a tight laugh. "Well, it's surprising. I mean, it's great, of course. But are you sure this is something you can handle?" There it was. The doubt, the subtle jab at my capability. I turned to face her fully, keeping my voice light. "Funny. James seems to think I can." Her smile faltered for just a second before she recovered. "Of course. I was just thinking of you, Emma. I wouldn't want you to get your hopes up." I held her gaze. "Don't worry. My hopes are just fine." She forced a chuckle and patted my arm like she hadn't just tried to undercut me. "We should catch up tomorrow. Maybe before your meeting with James." The first knew exactly what she was doing. She wanted to gauge how much of a threat this opportunity was to her carefully curated narrative. I shrugged. "Maybe. Depends on my schedule." Olivia's jaw tightened ever so slightly. She wasn't used to me being the one who was unavailable. I walked away before she could say anything else, feeling lighter than I had in years. The next morning, Max and I ate breakfast on our small balcony, the ocean stretching endlessly before us. He was happily munching on pancakes when he looked up. "Mom?" "Yeah, bud. Why does Aunt Olivia act like that?" I sighed. "Like what?" He pushed his fork through the syrup. "Like she's better than you." I let out a soft chuckle. "Because she thinks she is. But why?" I thought about it for a moment. Some people need to feel important. And sometimes the only way they know how to do that is by making others feel small. Max frowned. "That's dumb." I smiled. "Yeah, it is." He went back to his pancakes, and I went back to my coffee. But inside, I was still mulling over his question. Why did Olivia act like that? Was it insecurity? Competition? Or had she just convinced herself that her life choices were the right ones, and mine were mistakes? I shook the thought away. I had more important things to focus on, like my meeting with James. At precisely 10 a.m., I walked into the resort cafe where James had suggested we meet. He was already there, looking relaxed with a cup of coffee in front of him. "Morning," he greeted, motioning for me to sit. "Morning." I took a deep breath, steadying my nerves. "So, tell me more about this project." James smiled. "It's an initiative to modernize music education. We want to create programs that actually engage students, not just force them through outdated curriculums. We're looking for educators who understand both music and how kids learn." I nodded slowly, intrigued. "And where do I fit in?" James leaned forward slightly. "We need someone with fresh ideas, someone who's actually in the classrooms, seeing what works and what doesn't. You've got the passion, the experience, and the perspective. That's rare." I swallowed. This was real. He wasn't just being polite, he meant it. "And the job itself?" I asked carefully. "It would start with development, working with our team to shape the curriculum. Eventually, you'd be training other educators, helping roll it out nationwide." My heart pounded. This was huge. "And what about?" I hesitated. "Salary?" James smiled. "We can more than double what you're making now. Plus, travel opportunities and creative input." I nearly choked on my coffee. James chuckled. "Good surprise?" I nodded, still processing. "Yeah, just a lot to take in." He gave me a moment before speaking again. "I don't need an answer today. Take the time you need." I exhaled, nodding. "Thank you, I appreciate that." James studied me for a second, then smiled. "You know, I had a feeling about you. The moment you started talking about your students, I laughed lightly. And what feeling was that you're meant for bigger things." His words settled deep in my chest, something stirring inside me that I hadn't felt in years. Maybe he was right. I was still lost in thought when I returned to the poolside, where the rest of the family had gathered. My mother waved me over, her expression unusually warm. "So, how was your meeting?" she asked, too casually. I glanced at Olivia, who was pretending not to listen. "It went well," I said simply. Mom pressed on. "And?" I shrugged. "We'll see." Olivia finally spoke, her voice laced with forced curiosity. "What exactly would you be doing?" I took a sip of my iced tea, playing along, just discussing some education projects. Her eyes narrowed just slightly. "That's interesting." Before I could respond, Carter came running up to our table, laughing. Mom, guess what? Dad's renting jet skis for us later. Olivia beamed. That's wonderful, honey. Carter turned to Max. You probably won't get to ride them, though. It's kind of expensive. My son flinched. I set my drink down. Actually, Max and I have plans. Carter smirked. What? Like more bus rides? Max looked down, his cheeks burning. I took a slow breath, keeping my voice calm. No. We're going to explore Miami. Maybe take a boat tour. Carter shrugged. Sounds boring. I leaned closer, dropping my voice just for him. You know what really sounds boring? Spending your whole life thinking money makes you important. Carter's face scrunched in confusion, like he couldn't quite process the idea. Olivia's head snapped toward me, but before she could say anything, I smiled sweetly. Enjoy your jet skis. Then I turned to Max. Come on, kiddo. Let's go see the city. As we walked away, Max looked up at me. Mom? Yeah? His small hand gripped mine. That was awesome. I grinned. Yeah, buddy. It really was. Behind us, I could feel Olivia's eyes burning into my back. She had spent years keeping me in my place, but that place didn't exist anymore. The Miami sun was high overhead as Max and I strolled through the lively streets. The salty breeze mixed with the smell of food carts selling empanadas and fresh fruit. And for the first time since we'd arrived, I felt truly free. No backhanded comments, no forced conversations, just me and my son, exploring the world. Max sipped on a fresh mango smoothie, his eyes darting between the colorful murals that covered the buildings. Mom, can we take pictures? I smiled. Of course. He pulled out his small tablet, snapping photos of everything from street performers to a woman selling handmade bracelets. As he focused on capturing the moment, I found myself watching him. For so long, I had worried about Max, about how he saw himself in comparison to Carter, about how our family treated us. But now, watching him light up at something as simple as a new place, I realized something. Max didn't need them. He never had. And maybe, just maybe, neither did I. By the time we returned to the resort, the sun was beginning to dip toward the horizon. The pool area was bustling with guests, and from across the deck, I spotted Olivia lounging under an umbrella, sipping a cocktail. She saw us before I could turn away. Emma, there you are. Her voice was too cheerful, too forced. Max and I walked over, and before I could even sit, Olivia was already digging in. So, how was your boat tour? I shrugged. It was great. Max loved it. She hummed, swirling her drink. You know, I was thinking, since things seem to be going so well for you, maybe we should talk about opportunities. I raised a brow. Opportunities? Olivia leaned in slightly. For Carter. Ah, there it was. I crossed my arms. What about him? Well, she said, in her usual sweet yet condescending tone, you're meeting with James, and since he clearly likes you, I thought maybe you could put in a good word. I blinked, stunned for a second. Wait, I said slowly, you want me to ask James to help Carter? Olivia tilted her head, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. You know how competitive these programs are. It never hurts to have connections. I let out a short laugh. Wow. So let me get this straight. You've spent years looking down on me. And now that I might actually have something valuable, you want me to help you? Olivia stiffened. That's not fair, Emma. I'm thinking about Carter. I shook my head. No, you're thinking about winning. You want to make sure your perfect little world stays intact. She scoffed. Oh, come on. Don't act like you wouldn't do the same for Max if you had the chance. I met her gaze evenly. The difference is, I wouldn't treat people like they're beneath me until I needed something from them. Her expression faltered just slightly. Emma, I'm just trying to help my son. I sighed. And I'm trying to help mine. She watched me for a long moment before exhaling sharply. You know what? Forget it. I smiled. Already did. And with that, I turned and walked away, leaving her sitting there in stunned silence. Max followed beside me, looking up with wide eyes. Mom. I glanced down. Yeah? That was awesome, I laughed, ruffling his hair. It was, wasn't it? That evening, I got a message from James asking if I wanted to meet again before the wedding. We sat on the outdoor patio of the resort cafe, the soft sound of waves crashing in the distance. He sipped his coffee, watching me carefully. You seem lighter, he noted. I smirked. It's been an eventful day. James chuckled. I can imagine. Then he leaned forward slightly. So, have you thought about my offer? I took a deep breath. Yeah, I have. He waited, patient as ever. And I exhaled, feeling the weight of my decision settle. I think I'm ready. James smiled. Good. I hesitated. It's a big change, though. I mean, I've spent my whole life in one place. What if? James held up a hand. Emma. I stopped. You wouldn't be here if you weren't ready. I swallowed, nodding slowly. You're right. He grinned. I usually am. I laughed, shaking my head. Modest, too. James lifted his coffee. It's part of my charm. I smiled, looking out over the ocean. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just getting by. I was stepping forward, and it felt incredible. The morning of the wedding, I woke up early, stepping out onto the balcony just as the sun was beginning to rise. Max was still asleep, curled up under the blankets. I watched him for a moment, my heart full. Then I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in a while. Hello? I smiled. Hey, Dad. There was a brief pause before his voice softened. Emma, it's good to hear from you. We hadn't spoken much over the years, not because we didn't care, but because my mother had always controlled the narrative. She made the calls. She planned the visits. But now, I wanted to change that. I just wanted to say hi, I said, and I think I'm moving for a new job. My father's voice brightened. That's great, sweetheart. I'm proud of you. One swallowed the lump in my throat. Thanks, Dad. We talked for a little while longer, and when I hung up, I felt lighter. The wedding was beautiful, grand, elegant, everything my uncle and his new wife wanted. But for me, the real moment wasn't in the vows or the first dance. It was later, when I stood with Max on the beach, the waves lapping at our feet. He looked up at me, his expression thoughtful. Mom? Yeah? Are we gonna be okay? I crouched down so we were eye level. Better than okay. Max smiled. Good. I pulled him into a hug, holding him close. For years, I had let other people define me. I had let my family's opinions shape how I saw myself. But not anymore. I was finally taking control. And this was just the beginning. The wedding ended in a whirlwind of music, laughter, and champagne toasts. As my family danced under the golden lights of the resort, I sat back and watched, feeling more like an outsider than ever before. But for the first time, I was okay with that. Max was off playing by the beach, kicking up sand with some of the other kids. He had bounced back quickly from Carter's usual jabs, proving once again that his resilience was stronger than their pettiness. I turned my attention back to the celebration, my gaze settling on Olivia and my mother. They were laughing with a group of guests, perfectly poised, effortlessly charming. For years, I had let their approval or lack of it define my worth. Now, their opinions felt smaller, like background noise instead of the main narrative. James appeared beside me, hands in his pockets. Not dancing, I smirked. Not really my thing. He nodded toward Max. Your kid's got some serious energy. I smiled. He does. He's excited for what's next. James studied me. And you? I exhaled, letting my shoulders relax. Yeah, I think I am too. A slow smile spread across his face. Good. The music shifted to something softer. Couples moving onto the dance floor. James glanced at me. What about now? I chuckled. Are you asking me to dance? He shrugged, teasing. Think of it as part of your new beginning. I hesitated for only a moment before placing my hand in his. All right, but if I step on your foot, it's your fault for asking. James laughed. Deal. As we moved onto the dance floor, I caught Olivia, watching from across the room. Her expression was unreadable, but I didn't linger on it. She had spent enough time living in my head. Tonight wasn't about her. It was about me. The next morning I woke up early, stepping onto the balcony to take in the last bits of ocean air before our departure. The resort was quieter now, guests still asleep or nursing their post-wedding exhaustion. I checked my phone and saw a message from James. Safe travels. We'll talk soon. I smiled, typing back a quick response. Max stirred inside, stretching his arms with a sleepy yawn. Morning, he mumbled. Morning, kiddo. He blinked at me. Are we really moving? I sat on the edge of his bed. Yeah, it's a big change, but I think it's a good one. Max thought for a second, then nodded. As long as we're together, I don't care where we go. I ruffled his hair. That's my boy. At the airport, we stood in the same terminal where, just days ago, Olivia and my mother had laughed about our bus ride. Now, everything was different. I spotted Olivia near the check-in counter, her face tight with stress as she spoke with Ethan. He looked agitated, arms crossed, nodding sharply as she spoke. I had no idea what they were arguing about, and for the first time in my life, I didn't care. Max and I approached our gate, ready for our flight home, our last flight home. After this, we'd be on to something new, something bigger. Max tugged on my sleeve. "Mom, look." He pointed to a large coach bus parked outside the terminal, identical to the one we had taken to Florida. I stared at it for a long moment, the memories of that trip flashing in my mind. Meeting James, the long conversations, the realization that I wanted more for us. I smiled. "Sometimes," I murmured, "taking the longer road leads you exactly where you need to be." Max grinned. "Like an adventure." "Exactly." And with that, we boarded our plane, ready for the next chapter of our lives. The view from our new apartment stretched out over the city skyline, a far cry from the cramped space we had left behind. Max was sitting on the floor, putting the finishing touches on a science project. "Done," he announced proudly. I leaned over to look. "That's incredible, Max," he beamed. "I think my teacher's gonna love it." I ruffled his hair. "Of course she will." My phone buzzed. It was an email from James, confirming next week's workshop. I had spent the last year working with Crescendo Innovations, helping reshape music education in ways I had never imagined. We had traveled, built programs, and made an impact. And most importantly, I had stopped waiting for approval that I never needed in the first place. Max looked up at me. "Mom?" "Yeah?" His eyes sparkled. "Are we happy?" I exhaled, smiling as I looked around at everything we had built. "Yeah, kiddo, we are." Story 2. When I returned from a business trip, I discovered that my wife had changed the locks. "From my couch," she texted. "I found someone better." I inhaled deeply, grinned, and answered, "Are you certain about that?" Then I turned to go. She was yelling on the phone 4 days later. During our most recent video call, something didn't feel right. The throw pillows were rearranged in our living room, where Vivian was seated. I nearly missed it since it was such a little element. "You've been married for 8 years and you notice these things?" She had lost the corner cushion that she always kept on her side of the couch. One I had never seen before took its place. She said she needed a change and shrugged it off when I brought it up. I was finishing off a vacation to Seattle that lasted 2 weeks. Larger project, greater potential. When I departed, Vivian had been helpful. I should knock their socks off, they said. However, as the days passed, our talks became more hurried and her texts grew shorter. When I gave her excellent news about the project, she stopped asking how my day was going. Her answers seemed forced, phony, or just worn out from work. She would say, "It gets, you know." I was aware that I had assisted her in starting her career from scratch. She was unaware of the true amount of money I had put into her achievement. However, we will address it. 3 days before to my return, the first serious warning sign appeared. I could hear masculine chuckling in the background during our evening conversation. Vivian instantly responded that it was simply the TV when I questioned her about it. Although I had built a unique sound bar on our TV myself, this voice was undoubtedly that of someone. Shortly after pretending to have a headache, she hung up. At 2:00 p.m., I touched down, Thursday. I just landed an SMS and got no answer. Unusual since Vivian always responded in a few minutes. It seemed like the Uber journey home took longer than normal. I saw other information that didn't appear right. Our family plan prevented her from identifying her location, and her Instagram stories featured our living room from hitherto unexplored perspectives. I believed my key was jammed when it refused to spin in the lock. Realizing that the lock was new took a whole minute. I felt strangely at ease as I stood there with my bag still in hand. While I was abroad, my wife, with whom I had been married for 8 years, changed the locks. Her text message arrived at that moment. "I've found a better one. Make no attempt to enter. I've moved on." The timestamp indicated that she was typing this while seeing me from my couch in my home via our security camera. I inhaled deeply before typing. "Are you certain of that?" After that, I wheeled my bag behind me and left. No scene, no hammering on the door, no drama. As she attempted to reply, only 3 dots appeared and vanished. I called my friend Damien after checking into a neighboring motel. He had put together what I had missed in less than an hour. Vivian had been seeing a customer of her business named Ezekiel. Over the previous month, they had been seen at eateries. This is where things become fascinating, though. In the past, Ezekiel has dated married women in roles similar to Vivian's. Always. While Damien was speaking, they were about to make significant professional decisions. I went to our shared cloud storage and logged in. Tech was not Vivian's forte. The passwords I had created were never altered by her. They were there, 3-week-old pictures of them together in our home. But in her haste to replace me, she had overlooked something important. Once more, my phone buzzed. "You're handling this better than I thought you would, Vivian. Don't fight for us." I suppose my decision to locate someone better was correct. As I considered the paper I had just discovered on our cloud storage, I grinned. She had forgotten about a paper from last year, when I had assisted her in establishing her financial portfolio. I gave my lawyer a screenshot that I had taken. "Let me have 4 days." I responded to the SMS. "After that, we'll see who discovered anything superior." She responded right away. "What is the intended meaning of that?" I didn't respond. Rather, I turned on my laptop and started writing an email to some former coworkers. I got all I needed before midnight to let her know precisely what she was losing. "I'll begin moving things along tomorrow." As Vivian attempts to find out what I know, I'm enjoying the continual buzz of my phone for the time being. The finest aspect? She is unaware of the roots upon which the cozy life she currently enjoys, which she shares with him on my couch, was established. She's going to break. For now, let her enjoy her superior decision. She will discover in 4 days that some choices have unanticipated repercussions. First of all, I want to update you and thank you for your support of my last article. I was able to focus thanks to your remarks. These are the events of the past 24 hours. The agreement Vivian signed when I assisted her in establishing her investment portfolio is the one I mentioned discovering. She overlooked the fact that I assisted her with more than simply investing. The majority of the capital came from me. The agreement made it quite clear that some interests would have to be sold right away if we split up. However, that was not the cause of her worry. Sophia, Vivian's sister, contacted me last night. She was in tears. "Hunter, I can no longer be silent. Ezekiel, this is the 3rd time he has done this. He preys on women like Vivian, takes advantage of their connections, and then vanishes after achieving his goals." Although I was previously aware of Ezekiel's pattern, Sophia provided information that I was unaware of. 2 months ago, she supplied screenshots of Vivian and Ezekiel's talks. Their romance was not the only thing they were planned. Using the details I had given Vivian about the next projects my firm was working on, they were talking about business prospects. According to Sophia, there's more. Vivian requested me to keep a few documents for her last week, claimed that it was only backup copies of work-related materials. Today, I had a look at them. Hunter. She has been transferring funds. Large quantities. Sophia, I believe, hung up into our shared accounts. It was there. Vivian had been buying expensive things under false pretenses, such as a new automobile, expensive furnishings, artwork, or even household expenditures, all purchased during the past month and concealed under several transactions. The intriguing aspect? Although she had made the down payment using our joint account, her business expense account was utilized to finance the major items. I had assisted her in creating the identical account years prior. I was still identified as a financial advisor on that one. It was time to show her just how much she was risking. I sent a text message. "I just had a fascinating conversation with the board on those cost reports, especially the ones from the previous month. The couch looks fantastic. Original receipts would be useful, by the way." She responded in a matter of seconds. "What are you discussing?" "Oh, and it was really instructive to learn about Ezekiel's past with Mills and Carson. 2 years and 3 settlements. It's impressive." The typing indicator then came and went many times. "Hunter, we must speak." "Yes, we will. Tomorrow." Following the conclusion of my ethics committee meeting, her subsequent message revealed genuine panic. "Which meeting? Let's talk about this, Hunter." I didn't answer. Instead, I wrote an email to the board outlining my concerns regarding specific financial issues and sent images from Sophia to my lawyer. Just insurance. I haven't sent it yet. Damien brought a USB drive and takeout to the motel. "I found something you won't believe." Pulling up files on his laptop, he said. It turns out that Ezekiel had been recording more than just his pillow discussion with Vivian. Thorough conversations on customer information, future projects, and anything else. She is being used by him. Damien shook his head in agreement. And she is so engrossed in it that she is unable to anticipate what will happen. The buzzing on my phone persisted. Vivian was now bargaining instead of panicking. You know you're mistaken. Regardless of what you believe, I can describe anything. Don't be hurried, please. I was interested in the final message. None of this has to be communicated to the board. We can work something out. I sent my last SMS of the evening with a smile. Spend 10 minutes checking your email. Pay close attention to the March 15th attachment. According to the guide, she signed the partnership arrangement on March 15, the one she had obviously not read thoroughly enough. The one that allowed me considerable influence over the main financial choices made by the business. Vivian is blowing up my phone as I type this. On social media, Ezekiel's name has vanished. She used business funds to purchase the expensive sofa. Suddenly, the one she was sitting on with such pride in those pictures is up for sale online. I have a meeting tomorrow morning. With the ethics committee? No. She was just rattled by it. If Vivian's previous actions are discovered, the actual meeting will be with someone who stands to lose far more. Once everything is moving forward, I'll provide another update. Right now, I'm seeing her gradually come to terms with the fact that her superior decision might cost her all she has fought so hard to achieve. My largest card hasn't even been used yet. Since things escalated more quickly than anticipated, here are 2 brief updates from the past 24 hours. Do you recall the meeting I mentioned? It was about something far more significant than Vivian's spending reports. 5 years ago, I did more than introduce people when I helped Vivian get her job. I made a sizable investment using a holding company name. She didn't bother to do any research. She was so thrilled about the chance at the time that she hardly paid attention to the paperwork she had just signed. I had to direct her attention to her new corner office in order to notice the specifics. I brought all 3 months' worth of questionable transactions, taped conversations, and receipts to the board meeting this morning. However, I didn't show any of it. Rather, I just put my voting rights as a stockholder on the table. The chairman had a wonderful expression on his face. You are Morgan Holdings' silent partner. I gave a nod. Additionally, I'm worried about some recent choices made by several executive team members. At that moment, my phone began to buzz. My coworker, Olivia, who had been monitoring the situation, texted Ezekiel as she left Vivian's office. He appears angry. She's in tears. It turns out that Ezekiel met with the legal team from his former employer this morning. Some secret information that had inexplicably found its way to their rivals piqued their curiosity. Details that coincided exactly with when he and Vivian had their business meals. I was able to voice my concerns with the company's direction and recommend a comprehensive audit of all executive spending during the 47-minute board meeting. Long enough for Vivian to learn that her soon-to-be ex-husband was her silent partner who held 12% of the business. The messages began to flood in. Vivian, for what duration have you held shares? Vivian, how come you didn't tell me? Vivian, Hunter, could we please discuss this? Vivian, everything I've worked for will be destroyed by you. To the last one, I responded, no, you were the one who did it. Examine your email. Screenshots of her talks with Ezekiel about private corporate information and the partnership agreement she had signed 5 years prior were included in the email. The one that mentions ethical transgressions in great detail. Then Sophia called. Vivian was just dumped by Ezekiel. Said that she poses too much of a risk. Hunter, she's going crazy. Her credentials were already suspended when she attempted to access the executive accounts. How are the accounts known to you? Since I was the one who recommended the audit to the board, I inquired. Last week, she requested me to hold those documents when I viewed them. Sophia spoke steadily. My sister is someone I adore. However, after what she did to you, she asked me to assist conceal the evidence. My attorney phoned at that point. The board had made up its mind. Vivian was not being fired. That would be too messy and too public. Rather, they were giving her an option. Quit quietly or be subject to a thorough probe on her behavior. Her stock options would be suspended for review in any case. Damien texted me just as I was about to return to the hotel. Look at the security cameras, dude. When I logged in, I saw Vivian in our home office, furiously searching through files. It was the same office where, 3 years prior, I had concealed a safe beneath the artwork of our Bali honeymoon. The safe in which I stored copies of all the papers, investments, and proof that I had contributed to her professional development. She located the safe and tried every possible combination of her birthday, our wedding date, and the day she was promoted. Wrong, wrong, wrong. The mix. She signed the cooperation agreement on that date, the day she won everything that she would soon lose. My phone rang once more. It was the chairman this time. We must discuss the company's future, Hunter. The security feed caught my attention. For the final time, the luxury couch that Vivian had purchased to impress Ezekiel was already worn, and she was sitting at my desk with her head in her hands, having given up on the safe. I informed the chairman that I would be there in 20 minutes and that I had some suggestions on the reorganization of the executive team. Vivian will find out tomorrow just how much power I've had all along. Not only her work, but all the choices she believed she made on her own throughout the previous 5 years. The finest aspect? I never had to speak louder. Threatening was never necessary. She simply needed to let her own decisions take over. The final version will be available soon. I have one more card to play. The last update. My last update was 1 month ago. I wanted to hold off on announcing the outcome until everything was done. Do you recall the previous card I mentioned? The company shares and the expense reports weren't the only things at stake. It had to do with something far more strategic. The couch will be our first focus. Vivian purchased that $12,000 designer item to win Ezekiel over. She wasn't just using business funds. She made use of money from a special account that was created especially for a planned merger. Ezekiel was attempting to obtain inside information regarding the same merger. Here's the lovely part, though. I anticipated that she would act in this manner. I learned from 5 years of marriage that Vivian couldn't help but flaunt herself. I therefore began setting the foundation 3 months prior to my trip to Seattle. Every detail about possible deals I discussed over dinner. Every informal discussion about the projects my company is working on. All of the carefully crafted information was useless, despite its apparent value. Vivian was unaware that the actual projects and agreements were concealed behind non-disclosure agreements, NDAs. The board convened an emergency meeting the morning following my last update. They showed Vivian everything, including the unapproved spending, the information that had been leaked, and the audio recordings of their talks with Ezekiel. But the last blow, Sophia was the source. With a laptop filled with emails between Vivian and Ezekiel about how they would use my insider knowledge to benefit from the merger, my sister-in-law entered the boardroom. Emails from before my trip to Seattle. Sophia spoke steadily, and I kept copies of everything she said. She kept asking me to keep documents, and every time they discussed taking advantage of Hunter's position, I was unable to remain silent. In an attempt to defend herself, Vivian said that Ezekiel had tricked her. Olivia's role came into play then. She provided proof that Ezekiel had been collaborating with our main rival the entire time. Vivian carefully crafted false information that led our rivals down costly dead ends with every bit of valuable information she gave him. The board's decision was unanimous. Vivian was terminated. Her stock options voided and her reputation in the industry destroyed. But I wasn't done. Remember that partnership agreement she signed? The one giving me control over major financial decisions. It had another clause. Any ethical violations would trigger an immediate review of all personal assets acquired during the partnership. The house purchased with a loan I'd guarantee your car bought through a company lease. I'd arranged even her precious designer wardrobe, mostly bought with company funds. I'd helped her access. By the time my lawyers finished, Vivian was left with exactly what she'd brought into our marriage, her personal savings, and a stack of student loans I'd quietly stopped paying. Ezekiel disappeared the moment things went south, but not before my private investigator documented every meeting, every transaction, every lie. He told Vivian about his wealthy family and business empire. Last week, I received a hand-delivered letter from Vivian. Inside was a house key, the same one she'd made when she changed the locks. There was also a note. I understand now. You didn't just help build my career. You designed its self-destruct sequence. She was right. Every step up the corporate ladder, every connection she made, every opportunity she grabbed, I'd carefully constructed it all with one purpose. It could all be dismantled. The moment she betrayed my trust, the couch, it was just delivered to my new office. A reminder that sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying someone's world. It's about letting them destroy it themselves while thinking they're winning. Damien asked me yesterday if it was all worth it. If spending years setting up such an elaborate contingency plan was excessive, I looked around my new corner office, the one that used to be Vivian's, and smiled. The best revenge, I told him, is watching someone realize that their better choice was actually their biggest mistake. Yesterday, I signed the final paperwork. The merger went through the real one, not the decoy. Vivian and Ezekiel tried to exploit. The company's value tripled overnight. Vivian watched it happen from her parents' guest room, where she's been staying since everything fell apart. Her last text to me was simple. "You planned this all along, didn't you?" I didn't answer. Some questions don't need answers. The designer couch sits in my office now, barely used a $12,000 trophy of someone else's hubris. Sometimes the best things in life aren't free. They're just paid for by someone else's mistakes. Story 3. Caroline Morrison rushed out of the University Hospital's pharmacy department as the sky in Philadelphia began to fade. Another hectic day had passed. Pulling her cell phone from the pocket of her white coat, she looked at the clock. Her husband, Patrick, had left a message. "Today, I could be a bit late. The study has reached a pivotal point. I adore you." Grinning, Caroline typed her response and made her way to the hospital parking lot. Her life had altered significantly in the 8 years since she had first met Patrick Hamilton. She was born into a middle-class family in a small town, attended pharmacy school on a scholarship, and was now employed at the university hospital as a reputable pharmacist. Caroline has no complaints about her life. It had been fate that brought them together with Patrick. He was a researcher for a large pharmaceutical firm and had spoken at a conference that Caroline had gone to. Their love of science and, most importantly, their genuineness united the two. Patrick was Caroline's ideal spouse because of his kind disposition and keen intelligence. The existence of her mother-in-law, Martha, would be the one thing that would cast a shadow over her life. Caroline climbed into her vehicle and turned on the ignition. Her phone rang. She glanced at the computer and saw Martha's name there. She hesitated for a second, then inhaled deeply before picking up the phone. "Hi, Martha." "Caroline," said a chilly voice. "Regarding Rebecca's wedding, I'm phoning. Would it be possible for you to attend the rehearsal dinner the day after tomorrow? I want to hold on to it, only family. Once more, here we go." Caroline believed that next week was the wedding of Patrick's sister, Rebecca. Caroline had been completely shut out from the start of the planning. However, what about Patrick? "I will personally explain to my son. You must be quite busy with your employment at the hospital." There was cynicism in Martha's voice. Caroline just responded, fighting the want to respond. "I get it." She hung up and clamped her hands on the driving wheel. Martha was a member of high society and hailed from a well-known family in Philadelphia. She still viewed Caroline as an outsider and had been adamantly against her son's marriage. Rebecca, Patrick's sister, adopted a similar stance and treated Caroline with disdain. Both of them had repeatedly treated her in a degrading manner, but she had put up with it because she loved Patrick. On occasion, Patrick would chastise his sister and mother for their actions. However, he held out hope that they would finally comprehend. As soon as Caroline got to the flat, on the table, she discovered a wedding invitation. A glitzy picture of Rebecca and Thomas Bradshaw, the son of another well-known family, was included. She flipped it over and saw a sticky note written by Patrick. "Mom personally delivered this. I told her you were at work when she inquired about you. I cherish you." She let out a sigh. This was her world, the Hamilton family's undesired wife. However, Caroline had been noticing strange things about her mother-in-law's actions as a pharmacist lately. When she chanced to get a glance of Martha's shopping bag the other day, she discovered that she had just purchased specific chemicals and plants. Her professional intuition had raised red flags. Caroline looked at the wedding date as she accepted the invitation. Her thoughts was filled with the possibility that anything may occur. Caroline went over to her friend Michael Waiter, who was employed at the hospital the following day. He used to work in the hospital cafeteria and was a buddy of Patrick's from college. "I need a favor from you, Michael." After making sure no one was present, she spoke quietly. "At Rebecca's wedding, you're a server, correct?" Michael gave a nod. "Indeed. I was employed by Martha." "Is there a problem?" With a serious attitude, Caroline added, "I just feel like I should watch what I drink. Would it be feasible for you to swap out my glass for another one without anyone noticing?" Michael was taken aback, but he soon grew serious. "I understand. I'll be watching. Are you certain that something is happening? It's only instinct. She gave a shrug. Perhaps it's the intuition of my pharmacist. Michael gave Caroline's hand a little squeeze. Let me do it. I respect you too, Patrick, and you are a great friend. If something goes wrong, I'll assist. Thank you. Caroline smiled back, appreciative. Caroline had been anxious since the morning of the wedding. She fiddled with her dress's folds and kept checking her haircut in the mirror. Patrick took her by the back. You look stunning. He gave her a cheek kiss. Let's have fun today. Rebecca is having a big day. Caroline grinned, but she felt a whirl of fear. Indeed, without a doubt. They reached Philadelphia's most renowned hotel, the Ritz-Carlton. People from high society were arriving and leaving from the elegantly decorated hotel lobby. Caroline inhaled deeply as Patrick exited the vehicle and opened her door. Are you ready? Patrick softly held out his hand. Caroline clasped his hand and nodded. Come on. At the lobby of the hotel, there were already plenty of guests. Champagne glasses were in hand as people in pricey gowns and tuxedos engaged in discussion. Everyone looked at Caroline and Patrick for a moment when they walked in. There were whispers. She attempted to walk with dignity and straightened her back. A young female employee gave a timid grin at the reception. Please tell me your names. Hamilton, Patrick, and Caroline. Patrick replied. The employee seemed a little perplexed as they went over the list. Indeed. Here it is. She gestured at the map of the venue. We have your seats ready. At the designated spot, Caroline scowled. The seat that was farthest from the main table was in the farthest corner. Is there a mistake? Caroline asked in a low voice. The bride's brother is named Patrick. The employee's responses were contrite. These are the directives from Miss S. Hamilton. This layout was especially desired by her. Patrick's face briefly lit up with anger, but he immediately smothered it. I get it. I do not wish to make any trouble because it is my sister's wedding. He spoke softly to Caroline. Are you able to tolerate it? Caroline grinned for you as she met her husband's gaze. Mother-in-law Martha, wearing an opulent silk gown, walked up to them as they entered the venue and smiled icily. I see that you were able to dress appropriately today, Caroline. She flicked a sardonic glance up and down Caroline's outfit. I guess you tried your best for today, but it has a common flavor. Caroline gave Patrick a little push on the arm just as he opened his mouth to speak. Thank you. It appears to be a beautiful ceremony. She answered coolly. Yes, Martha answered, laughing softly through her nose. After then, Patrick was the subject of a ceremony fit for the Hamilton family's custom. Rebecca's guest will be seated at the main table, so your places are apart. Please be understanding. Patrick scowled. Her brother is me. The main table is often occupied by family. It is a unique day. Before departing to welcome the other guests, Martha firmly stated, Please respect Rebecca's wishes. Patrick and Caroline made their way to their designated seats. The table was already occupied by a number of visitors. They seemed to be social acquaintances or distant relatives. Caroline was ready to take a seat when Martha came back. She remarked, loud enough for the other guests to hear, You should be thankful I set you up with a seat at all. These seats were once intended to be reserved for families. Around the table there were giggles. Even though Caroline's cheeks were flaming, she remained calm and sat down politely. When music announced the start of the ceremony, Patrick's face flushed crimson with rage, and he was going to address his mother. The wedding was held in a serious manner. Rebecca proudly walked in wearing a white dress. As Caroline saw the ceremony, Thomas Bradshaw welcomed his wife with a gentlemanly demeanor. Sometimes she saw her mother-in-law and Rebecca glancing triumphantly at her. The reception started after the newlyweds left and the vows were exchanged. Employees moved about, handing out champagne for a toast. Caroline trusted Michael, even if he was not yet a parent. A young server came up to the table where Caroline and Patrick were sitting and started passing out champagne glasses. Caroline's trained pharmacist's sense of smell detected a problem the instant a glass was set in front of her. She detected a faint aroma that wasn't typical of champagne. Examining the glass attentively, she saw the hue change almost imperceptibly. Reluctant to take a sip, she put the glass down carefully. When Patrick saw, he said, What's wrong? It smelled odd. Caroline started, but Patrick let out a groan. Once more, you're overanalyzing. You worry about my mother too much, he replied softly. Look, nothing is wrong. After that, Patrick grabbed Caroline's glass and drank it. Across the table, mother-in-law Martha's face was suddenly devoid of color. Wait, she cried, leaping from her seat. Avoid drinking it. The whole venue's focus shifted on Martha. With a perplexed gaze, Patrick questioned his mother. "What's wrong?" "That is." Martha, unable to conceal her worry, mumbled. After taking a taste, Patrick glanced at the glass and remarked nonchalantly, "Delicious champagne." Martha froze close by, her eyes wide. Rebecca, too, gazed, looking astonished. Why? Why is nothing taking place? With a confused and anxious expression on her face, the mother-in-law mumbled. While surreptitiously transferring a sample of wine to a tiny vial, Caroline quietly watched their reactions. The venue's atmosphere briefly froze, but as long as Patrick acted normally, it gradually warmed back up to its initial state as the wedding vibe persisted. Caroline kept observing quietly. Martha and Rebecca looked anxiously at Caroline from time to time while they whispered to one another. Patrick pretended that nothing had occurred. Caroline pulled a little hand mirror from her luggage and pretended to check her appearance while surreptitiously inspecting the tiny vial that held the champagne sample she had gathered, all the while chatting with friends and family. Although it appeared to be a typical translucent liquid, she had a professional gut feeling that something wasn't right. "What's on your mind?" Patrick wrapped his arm over her shoulder and sat beside her. "Don't be concerned about my mom. She is constantly dramatic." Caroline grinned. "I'm all right. A bit worn out." Holding her hand, Patrick made a commitment. "Hold on a little while longer. After the ceremony, we'll depart early." The reception went according to schedule, and, although Caroline appeared composed, she was closely monitoring her sister-in-law and mother-in-law. It was obvious from their stress and anxiousness that something had gone wrong. Michael, a hotel waiter, approached Caroline as the evening carried on and the celebration neared its conclusion after making sure no one else was present. "I did as you asked," he answered softly. "I just replaced your glass with a new one." Before I got inside, he kept acting like he was serving dessert. "I caught Rebecca looking at your seat and fiddling with your glass." Caroline's gaze expanded. "Really?" Michael gave a quick nod. "Take caution. If you need anything, let me know. Thank you." Caroline smiled back, appreciative. "There's nothing else I need. The proof is already in my possession." Michael left to service other tables, but he appeared a little taken aback. As the evening wore on, many of the visitors started to depart. Patrick and Caroline were also getting ready to go. Instead of approaching them, Martha and Rebecca appeared to be purposefully avoiding eye contact in the opulent hotel lobby. Patrick attempted to bid his mother and sister farewell, but Caroline advised him that we should have a meaningful conversation tomorrow. "Tonight I'm exhausted." "How was your day?" Patrick said, sinking into the sofa when they arrived home. The ceremony itself was fantastic, but Mom and Rebecca's attitude was awful. Sitting next to him, Caroline inhaled deeply. "We must discuss your champagne, Patrick." "Oh, that." He chuckled softly. "When my mother abruptly yelled at me not to drink it, I was shocked. However, nothing occurred, correct?" "That's not true," Caroline remarked gravely. "Tomorrow, I would like to get it tested at the hospital. I believe there was a problem with the champagne." Patrick scowled. "Mom wouldn't, do you?" He stumbled. "That's unbelievable. She could have placed something in your drink. But why?" "Intuition," Caroline muttered. "Tomorrow, we'll know the truth." The following morning, Caroline got up early and went to the lab at the hospital. Jennifer, a lab worker and her buddy, was waiting. "Caroline, good morning." Jennifer gave a warm greeting, but her grin vanished as she noticed Caroline's grave countenance. "What's the matter?" Caroline reached into her bag and took out the little vial. "Are you able to examine this? Not only a standard alcohol test, but a screening for toxins." Jennifer accepted the vial without asking, despite her astonished expression. "Is it urgent?" "As quickly as feasible." Caroline gave a nod. A few hours later, a gray-faced Jennifer called Caroline to the lab. "Take a look at this." She gestured at the screen of the computer. "This champagne isn't your typical kind. Atropine traces were found. It's not much, but it's hazardous enough." Caroline's hands were shaking as she gripped the data. This was no accident. It was deliberate. "Don't you need to call the police to report this?" Jennifer inquired anxiously. Caroline pondered. "Not quite yet. I must first speak with Patrick." Caroline had laid out the test results on the dining table when Patrick got home that evening. As soon as he saw his wife's grave look, he realized what had happened. Quietly, he asked. Caroline explained that the champagne was laced with atropine in the right amounts and showed him the test results. Excessive doses are used as medication. This toxin can result in serious symptoms including fever and elevated heart rate, delusions, and death in the worst situation. At first, Patrick didn't believe it, but when he saw the proof, his face became red. He fell onto one of the chairs. No, Mom. In fact, I had a sneaking suspicion that something might occur before to the event. Caroline came clean. I had observed your mother purchasing specific chemicals and plants lately, and her eyes were filled with more animosity than usual. When observing me, I thus requested Michael, who works with me at the hospital, to replace my glass alone with a different one as a precaution. Patrick was clearly startled, displaying astonishment at his wife's fast thinking as well as anger toward his mother. It's unbelievable that mother would go to that extent, he mumbled incredulously. But when I drank it, why did nothing happen? It wasn't much. You only took one sip, correct? Caroline clarified. If I drained the glass, it was most likely determined to be adequate. Additionally, given your physique, a tiny quantity could not have displayed any signs is all. Patrick's face was crimson with anger. Why would a mother act in this way? His fist tightened. Was Rebecca also involved? There's no question based on their responses. Caroline let out a sigh. They both thought I was about to pass out. Most likely, they wanted to make fun of me during the wedding. This is not acceptable. Patrick got up and walked around the space. I should tell my sister and mother the truth. Their normal harassing is not like this. This is illegal. Anger made him shudder. Caroline calmly suggested that we present the proof. If not, they will carefully file the test findings and reject it. Tomorrow, let's go to Martha's house. First thing in the morning, not in the evening. It's crucial to avoid giving them time to get ready. Patrick was quite aback by how composed his wife was. I'm shocked that you're not upset, Caroline murmured softly. I've tried to fit in with your family for a long time if it were me. However, I've come to the realization that's not feasible following this occurrence. You, me, and our future are what count. Patrick went back to his wife's side and gave her a firm embrace. I apologize for this incident. My sister and mother did something that I cannot forgive. I'll see to it that they accept accountability. Keep your judgment clear of wrath. Caroline put her hand on his cheek. Let's deal with this gently. Patrick had trouble falling asleep that night. His inability to comprehend why his mother and sister detested his wife so much pained him. Several times he stood up and gazed out the window, sighing now and again. Caroline laid calmly in the meantime, mentally getting ready for the showdown tomorrow. It was time to put an end to years of humiliation, and she silently made up her mind to do it. In the dark, she kept her eyes open, anticipating the next day. Tomorrow, let's get it over with. She held Patrick's hand and murmured. Caroline and Patrick were in front of Martha's house the following morning. Caroline seemed relaxed in some way, while Patrick's face was stiff with worry. Are you ready? Patrick gave his wife's hand a squeeze. Indeed. Caroline gave a nod. She held a file with the samples in it. Outcomes of the test. James, the butler, answered the doorbell when Patrick rang it. He appeared a little taken aback by their presence, but he soon recovered his cool. Patrick, master. Madam Caroline. We've come to see my mother, James, Patrick stated firmly, but Martha is still at breakfast. It's critical. The butler escorted them to the reception area, which was filled with bulky, antique furnishings. The chamber recounted the generations, long riches, and legacy of the Hamilton family. The walls featured portraits of the family's forebears, and Caroline had the feeling that she would always be an outsider in this family. Martha eventually showed up wearing a silk morning dress. When she saw her son and daughter-in-law, she flinched for a second, but then calmed down. Why are you here at this hour of the morning? Did you not think Rebecca's wedding was amazing? She pretended to be calm while she spoke. What did you put in Caroline's glass? Patrick said in a tone that was particularly icy as he gave his mother a severe look. Before she recovered, Martha opened and closed her mouth in an attempt to conceal her anxiousness. What are you discussing? That's ridiculous. Put an end to the behavior. There was rage in Patrick's voice. We are aware. Silently, Caroline extracted the test findings from the file. This is what was found in the champagne. Atropine was added as a poison. It was a risky dose, but not a fatal one. Martha's face lost its color, and she could not think of anything to say. The door abruptly opened and Rebecca stepped inside as a nervous, quiet descended upon the room. She seems to have sensed something and was already appropriately attired. What's happening? Reading the mood of the room, Rebecca inquired uncomfortably. You ought to be aware. Patrick gave his sister an accusatory glance. We're discussing the events of yesterday's wedding, namely the poisoning of Caroline's champagne glass. Rebecca stared at her mother and went pale. Martha abruptly altered her attitude and fell into the sofa. Everything went awry as soon as you joined the Hamilton family. She pointed at Caroline and spoke louder. It was intended that Patrick would wed a girl from a more prominent family. Not like you, the daughter of a drug dealer. Mom. Anger made Patrick's voice waver. Regardless of her experience, Caroline is a great pharmacist. You ought to honor the Wi-Fi's decision. You don't get it, Martha replied sourly. The Hamilton family has a long history. Half of your children's blood will come from a lower social stratum. Do you think that's acceptable? Caroline asked calmly. Why did you feel the need to alienate me so strongly? Class consciousness isn't the only factor, is it? After a little pause, Martha turned to face Rebecca. Rebecca nodded slightly, and Martha went on. Elizabeth is a great friend of Rebecca's who comes from the Brown family. She is well educated, from a good background, and fits well with our social group. If you weren't here, she would be ideal for Patrick. Hold on. Patrick was taken aback. You were trying, Mother. We wanted you to get married again. Rebecca raised her voice, seeming resigned. That's enough, Mother, she replied. With a quivering voice, she turned to face Caroline and Patrick and confessed. Mother and I worked together on the plan, but we had no idea Patrick would drink it. We assumed Patrick would be content with Elizabeth if Caroline left. However, Patrick was taken aback by his sister's admission. Even you. He was taken aback. Really? You too? To Caroline. He stumbled. Aren't you wondering why nothing happened to Patrick? Caroline questioned Rebecca quietly. Rebecca looked perplexed as she nodded. The atropine, of course. My body weight was probably used to calculate the drug dose, Caroline stated quietly. Despite having a larger frame, Patrick just drank one drink. I work as a pharmacist as well. In the end, the vocation you despise rescued me. Caroline's voice was low. The smell of the glass told me something wasn't right. Before the ceremony, I had noticed something odd about my mother-in-law's conduct and had made arrangements to have just my drink refilled. Rebecca and Martha were in disbelief. You mean? Indeed. I requested that Michael just swap out my glass for a new one. Caroline gave a straightforward explanation, and thankfully, there were no negative consequences, even though my husband accidentally drank from it. Patrick glared at his sister and mother. This is something I will always remember, that you attempted to murder my spouse. Patrick, I'm severing our relationship. Martha spoke louder. My son is you. Your family should be your first choice, right? Family? Patrick gave a sour laugh. Respecting and loving one another is what family is all about. My family is Caroline. Rebecca started weeping. We just have your best interests in mind. Keep silent. Patrick cut his sister off. Don't discuss what's best for me. This is entirely incorrect. It is a crime with legal repercussions. Caroline touched Patrick on the arm. We're not going to call the cops about this, if the news media learns. Additionally, it would harm your reputation. She glanced at Rebecca and Martha, but she never came back to us. Additionally, this sample and test results will be turned over to the police if you ever attempt to obstruct us in any manner. Martha sobbed as she begged her son Patrick. Please think again. Mother, goodbye. Taking Caroline's hand, Patrick muttered icily and got to his feet. Most likely, we won't cross paths again. Just before they left the room. Caroline, Rebecca yelled out. Why? Why do you not report us? Caroline looked around and spoke in a low voice. Regardless of your opinion, I adore Patrick. The animosity must stop somewhere, and I don't want to harm his family's reputation. That's my opinion. Patrick and Caroline walked out the front entrance of Martha's residence. They were bathed in springtime brightness. Caroline inhaled deeply, allowing the fresh air to fill her lungs. Do you really want to avoid seeing the police? Patrick inquired. I'm positive. Caroline grinned. We can now at last proceed. For the two of us, it's a fresh start. Rebecca and Martha fell back in their seats and looked at one another silently. Morning light poured into the large kitchen of a colonial-style home in the suburbs of Philadelphia a year later. Caroline was in the backyard, looking out the window while she brewed coffee. A tiny vegetable garden was starting to take shape, and spring flowers were in full bloom. Patrick took her by the back. Good morning. In the arms of her spouse, Caroline grinned. Good morning. Did you get a good night's sleep? Indeed. Patrick gave a nod. Many thanks. The pair had begun a new life after their run-in with Martha and Rebecca. Patrick was engrossed in research at a new pharmaceutical business and had broken off all contact with Martha. The two were having a good time, while Caroline kept working at the hospital. Their relationship had grown stronger as a result of the experience, and they had unwavering faith in one another. "What do you have scheduled for today?" Picking up a coffee cup, Patrick inquired. "This afternoon, I have a checkup at the hospital." Caroline gave a cheerful response. Though it was hardly perceptible at the time, Patrick gently put his palm on his wife's stomach. There, a new life was emerging. 3 months have passed already. It still feels unreal. 3 weeks prior, Caroline had informed him that they were expecting a kid, Patrick. His face was beaming as he gave his wife a hug. "I'm so thrilled that we can begin a family together." At the same time, Martha and Rebecca's standing in society had completely collapsed. Following the ceremony, Thomas, Rebecca's fiancé, found out about what had happened. She vanished from the public eye after he ended the engagement. Martha's residence was deserted, living a solitary existence in sharp contrast to her opulent way of life. Patrick took in his mother's mail once again after breakfast. With a groan, he held out an envelope. Every week, Martha would send letters, but they were all returned unopened. "Perhaps we shall read them at some point," Caroline remarked softly. "Not just now, though." After giving a nod, Patrick put the envelope down. When the phone rang that evening, Patrick answered it, as they were lounging on the couch and talking about their future plans. It came from the medical facility. Martha was very ill when she was admitted. What ought we to do? After hanging up, Patrick questioned Caroline. "Shall I go see my mom?" Caroline grasped her spouse's hand. "I'll back your choice. Whatever you decide, I'm with you." There was a long pause before Patrick decided, "Come on." Merely to come. I don't mean that we're getting back together. When they arrived to the hospital to meet Martha, the elderly woman's appearance astounded them. In a year, she had become so much worse. When Martha saw them, she started crying. "I'm not pleading for pardon." Weakly, she continued, "I just wanted to see you once." Caroline remarked gently, "I've let the past go, but it will take time to rebuild trust," despite Patrick's conflicted face. "Be content with your new existence," Martha advised with a resigned grin. Caroline added, "Let's teach our child love, not hatred," as they drove home. "Your kindness saves me," Patrick said, glancing at his wife. They found out they were expecting a girl 2 weeks later. They chose to give her the name Hope, which means second chance. Join us in breaking the chain of malice. Like the spring brightness, Caroline's words shone on their new future. Story 4, My Sister Who Got Me Kicked Out at 17 is the title of this narrative. At Christmas dinner, they attempted to portray me as broke. She was unaware of my $7 million fortune. Her tantrum was invaluable. "Hello, everyone. I'm a 32-year-old woman, and I suppose I'm at last ready to tell my tale. I'm not trying to win pity or anything, but reading this when I was 8 years old could make someone who is going through similar family BBS feel less alone. My entire existence altered. My sister Lily was born 2 months early at that time, while my Aunt Jenny remained with me. I recall waking up in the middle of the night to find my dad running out the door. Even though I was only a child, I could tell something was really wrong, since everyone was stressing out over the baby. Naturally, Lily lived, but when they took her home, she was quite frail. Overnight, our home essentially became a miniature hospital. Everything was continually being cleaned by Mom, and the apartment always smelled like hand sanitizer and those medical wipes. The scariest thing, though, was how I abruptly started to threaten my own sister. Mom would become really upset if I made the slightest cough or sneeze. "Did I just hear a cough, Sarah?" she would inquire, staring at me as if I were a plague carrier. "With Lily, we can't take any chances. Get your backpack ready. You're spending a few days at your grandmother's house." This was a regular occurrence. I spent so many nights at Aunt Jenny's or Grandma's that I had my own pajamas and toothbrush at both homes. I found it sort of cool at first, like little getaways where I could have dinner of ice cream, occasionally. But eventually, even my 8-year-old brain understood what was going on. Lily was taking precedence over me, and I was being forced out of my own house. I clearly recall sobbing one night while sitting in Grandma's guest room because I was so ready to sleep in my own bed. I missed having a nightlight, my stuffed animals, and the sense of solitude. As I grew older, I made every effort to attract my parents' attention. I put a lot of effort into my studies and received straight A's. I won the 5th grade district science fair with my research about plant development and various light kinds after staying up late studying. My parents hardly notice it, so I was thrilled to show them. Furthermore, I don't even hold Lily responsible for any of this. Back then, she was a baby, a little child. She wasn't to blame. However, the pattern only became more unpleasant and apparent as the years passed. I was begging for any morsel of attention by middle school. I presented it to my dad after I aced a challenging math test, and the teacher even noted that I had extraordinary skill, hoping for some attention. "Math comes easily to you," he remarked, not even looking at it. "You need to be receiving flawless grades." After that, you returned to assisting Lily with her elementary math. All I did was go to my room and sob into my pillow. Gatherings with family were terrible. Even the simplest accomplishments from Lily would make my parents swoon. Sarah is doing well in school, but when someone inquired about me, Lily learned a new song. As though I were a supporting character in my own life, I so began reading novels by myself in my room a lot. At least the fictional characters took note of me. Now that I'm typing it out, it seems fairly pitiful, but that's how I handled things at the time. I would hope that this would be the day I mattered on my birthday every year. And every year, Lily would take precedence above everything else. On my 12th birthday. On the same day, Lily had a dancing recital. Can you guess which was more significant? My celebration was a simple cake party upon our return from her concert. My folks went to bed early since they were exhausted from the busy day. I watched the candles melt into the frosting while eating the remaining cake by myself in the kitchen. And believe me when I say that when you feel invisible in your own family as a child, you begin to think that's all you deserve. You begin to believe that perhaps there is a problem with you rather than their treatment of you. Lily wasn't even ill by the time she reached 7. Like, really? The child is running about in perfect health, no issues at all. However, my parents were unable to break free from their strange protective stance. And Lily quickly realized that she was in charge of everyone. She wasn't a moron. Every time she desired something, she would act pathetic and helpless, and it was always successful. Lily was a complete drama queen in high school, often making up stories about how I terrified her or mistreated her. It didn't matter what I did. I just tried to avoid her company most of the time. She enjoyed the attention, so she would make things up nonetheless. When I was 17, I reached my breaking point. I had to study for a large test after returning home, exhausted after debate team practice. I went to my room and shut the door because Lily was playing loud music in the living room. I needed some peaceful time to study, so I closed it naturally without slamming it or anything. 10 minutes or so later, my dad stormed into my room, looking quite irate. "How have you treated your sister?" I didn't know what he was discussing. As it turned out, Lily had cried and gone to them, saying I had slammed the door in her face and told her to stop talking. Total fabrications. However, they immediately believed her. No inquiries were made. They didn't even inquire about my version of events. Mom and Dad lost their minds. Dad yelled at me about how I was becoming too hostile and violent with my little Lily. Mom pretended that I posed a threat, claiming that my tantrums had been accumulating for months and that she was truly worried about Lily's safety. Fits? At home, I seldom spoke anymore. However, Lily had been sowing seeds for weeks, manipulating minor details to cast me in a negative light, such as saying that I was often in a foul mood, or that I gave her shady looks. I couldn't be heard. I made an effort to clarify, but it was ineffective. Lily was standing in the corridor, crossed arms, that little smile for me alone. She was well aware of her actions. Dad's face was flushed. "Your animosity for Lily is unmanageable. Anger?" I shut my damn door. "I lost my temper, that's all. But you believe her, of course. You always do." "This is not the kind of thing she would lie about," sharply, Mom remarked. I gave a chilly laugh. "She's always lying. But you can't see it because you're blind. For years, she has been playing you. You just don't care, because you're so anxious to have your ideal little princess." Dad's mouth tightened. "Take a look." "No, you view it," I returned fire. "For me, that was the last straw. It's quite obvious who you genuinely care about. It's her. She always is. Tomorrow, I might not be here, and you wouldn't realize until it caused Lily inconvenience." While Mom winced, Dad's face contorted in anger. "That's sufficient." I wasn't finished. "You are pitiful." The words burned in my throat as I spit. What's true doesn't matter to you. All you want is for things to be simple. I've had enough of you acting like you're not weak after you let her walk all over you. For being duped. There was a deep hush after that. Dad's expression grew glum. He tightened his hands at his sides. Leave. Low and risky, he said. Leave my house. I blinked, momentarily paralyzed. Are you serious? You are no longer welcome here. He gestured toward the door. Proceed. Dad booted me out when I was 17. I had little time for thinking, much less determining my destination. I left the majority of my belongings behind and crammed all I could into my sports bag and school backpack. Books, pictures, everything. I considered visiting my grandmother, but it didn't seem feasible. Despite her constant kindness, she never rebelled against my parents. It seemed more like being stowed away than welcomed each time I spent time there as a child. I had no intention of showing up, just to be instructed to make amends with my parents, or sent back. That night, I slept in my old Toyota, which was parked in a grocery store lot corner. I waited for them to call and tell me it was an error, so I could go home till 3 in the morning. The phone never rang. I ended up living in my car for over 4 months after that first night. Every night, I would park in different locations behind shops and in peaceful areas, anywhere that wouldn't draw attention. After gym class, I took a shower at school and worked on my schoolwork in the library until it closed. When it was sunny, I dried my clothing on the dashboard of my car after washing them in public restroom sinks. The fact that this occurred throughout the cold months of January through April was the hardest. Extremely chilly. My Toyota's heater hardly functioned. I would use these inexpensive blankets that I purchased from Dollar Tree to sleep in all of my clothing. Still, I would see my breath in the car and wake up shivering. I went to school every day, even though there were mornings when my windows were actually covered with frost. I never skipped a lesson, maintained my academic standing. I was resolved not to allow them to destroy my future either. I never received a call from my folks asking how I was doing, not throughout those months. Even though I was absolutely freezing to death in a car someplace, they didn't give a damn. In the meantime, I discovered on social media that they had already furnished my bedroom with a new desk and art materials for Lily to use as a hobby room. Shared images of it on Facebook as if I didn't exist. I made an effort to conceal the fact that I was homeless, although it's quite difficult to do so. Despite my best efforts to wash them, my garments began to smell. I never slept well, therefore I was constantly exhausted. I slept off in English class one day, and my instructor stayed behind to find out what was wrong. I started bawling right then and there, simply couldn't contain it any longer. They discovered that I had been living in my car for over 4 months when she phoned a school counselor. I was able to enter a youth shelter with the counselor's assistance. It wasn't very good. There were stringent restrictions about when you had to be in and out, and it was noisy and rather harsh. At least the temperature inside wasn't cold. At least there was a laundry room and actual showers. Up until my high school graduation, I resided in that shelter. In spite of everything, I kept my GPA at 4.0. I even received the title of valedictorian. My relatives did not attend the ceremony. I spoke to a group of parents and strangers about tenacity and conquering challenges without losing my cool. I saw all of these other children embracing their family, taking photos, and celebrating after the ceremony. I simply returned to the shelter by myself. To be honest, receiving my admission letter to college was the happiest day of my life till that point. Tuition and dorm accommodations are covered by a full scholarship to State University. When I opened the shelter, I practically sat down on the floor and started crying. I was teased by some of the other shelter children for sobbing over a letter, but I didn't mind. My ticket out was this. Everything the first owned fit into 2 trash bags when I went into the dormitories that August. After looking at my belongings, my roommate Jessica said, "That's all you brought?" "I like to travel light," I responded with a shrug. I wasn't going to disclose to this random lady that prior to college I was essentially homeless. It wasn't simply the academics that made college challenging. I had to balance a full academic load with 2 jobs. The scholarship simply addressed the fundamentals. I was hired to work in the dining hall, which was really cool since I got to eat for free while I worked. Worked 20 hours a week in the college library as well, because I could study at my desk most of the time, while other students went home for breaks or holidays. The library job was ideal. Since I had nowhere else to go, I would remain at the mostly vacant dorms. In fact, Those silent weekends on campus were really tranquil. No drama, no sense that I was a hindrance to anyone. Me and my books alone. And fortunate. Keep quiet. Following 4 years of sheer tedium. After earning my business degree, I was hired by Davis Company as an entry-level manager. I made $41,000 a year, which wasn't much, but it was enough to buy me a little apartment of my own. By most measures, the first flat was undoubtedly a terrible shithole. However, it seemed like an incredibly luxurious hotel after staying in a shelter vehicle. I recall thinking, no one can kick me out of here, as I sat on my used futon that first night. I own this. Thus, I have a dull office job, living on a salary, like every other 20-something. I'm so bored one evening that I'm simply browsing Instagram when I come across this advertisement. Discover how to use your money to your advantage. Normally, I wouldn't pay attention to such things since they seem so fraudulent. However, something prompted me to pause and click on it. For me at the time, the $700 fee of this online investing course taught by a lady named Rachel was a significant sum, like about all of my monthly food budget. However, it appeared to be genuine. I chose to give it a shot since she had solid credentials and positive ratings. To conserve money, I just ate peanut butter sandwiches and ramen for 2 months. My life was totally altered by that choice. After hearing Rachel's explanation of investing, everything that had before appeared confusing now made sense. I made a very tiny initial investment of $200 in a couple equities she suggested, then increased it over time as I grew more comfortable with it. I spent hours reading corporate reports and financial statements, watching YouTube lessons, and reading every book and article I could find because I was so determined to understand everything I could about the market. When I discovered a modest tech business that no one was talking about, it was my first major break. I invested $500, which was a significant risk for me at the time, did a ton of research, and genuinely believed in what they were doing. When they revealed a new product line, that investment increased to $4,200 in only 4 months. I then invested the majority of it in a biotech business that was testing a potential cancer therapy. Once more, it paid off handsomely. My money was tripled in around 6 months. The strange part was that I continued to use my day job as a disguise. I would be surreptitiously checking my investing app beneath the table while attending these mind-numbing sessions about quarterly targets or whatnot. I would be trying not to react as my boss babbled on about a 3% improvement in client retention. I discovered that one of my stocks had increased by 30% in a single day. I immediately invested every extra dime I earned. I never made any improvements to my life, continued to reside in the same little apartment. I continued to drive my old Toyota, which had more than 180,000 miles on it. Still purchased clothing from secondhand shops. I think many at work assumed I was just bad with money. Sarah must have enormous college loan debt or something. However, maintaining secrecy was the most difficult aspect. I was terrified that someone would find out. If I started living better all of a sudden, I didn't want my coworkers to start to suspect me. I most certainly did not want my family to somehow learn about it through rumors. I kept my financial records hidden. I used a different email for each trading account, never discussed investing with anybody, and only looked at my portfolio when I was by myself. By the time I was 25, I was earning more money in a day from my investments than I did in a month at my day job. It seemed unreal. I discovered I had just surpassed the $1 million milestone as I was eating breakfast one random Tuesday morning and looked at my portfolio. My legs genuinely became weak, so I had to sit on the floor. An entire $1 million. Me, the girl who used to wash laundry by counting quarters while living in her vehicle. However, I told no one at all. Nobody was aware of it. I was afraid that Lily or my parents would want to be family again if they found out. Over the years, I had witnessed Lily's capacity for manipulation. If she knew I had money, I could only image the type of sob tale she would make up. I continued to lead this strange double life, mundane work where I feigned interest in little pay increases. I apologized to guests for my little abode. I watched my investment accounts rise by thousands of dollars every day while driving an old automobile that made embarrassing sounds. At night, I would occasionally sit in my apartment with my laptop open to my accounts, which displayed numbers that were absolutely implausible, and simply giggle at how ridiculous it all was. I would appear to be thrilled about a $600 yearly rise at work earlier that day, only to return home to discover that I had gained $20,000 in a single day, thanks to a wise investment decision. When my coworkers would gripe about their inability to pay for trips, I would respond, "Yeah, the times are hard," while having enough cash on hand to purchase the entire business structure. I would pretend that the $3.50 for tax and tip truly mattered to me when I went out with friends, and we divided the check penny for cent. But I began to feel the weight of the secret. There's a strange gap between you and everyone else when you're hiding something that large. I was unable to discuss the things I was truly enthusiastic about. I couldn't attribute my occasional lack of focus on investing because the stock was plunging. It was lonely in an inexplicable manner. Additionally, I hadn't spoken to any of my family members in about 8 years. I celebrated birthdays and holidays alone for 8 years. Me and my hidden bank accounts alone. I had essentially made up my mind a long time ago that I would never again interact with any of them, like written them off altogether. Then, unexpectedly, Aunt Jenny reached out to me on Facebook. She wrote to ask if we could get coffee and to mention that she had been thinking about me. Growing up, Jenny was the only person who had ever shown me kindness. In fact, she used to give me $20 birthday cards when I was a child, and she once purchased me new shoes after mine broke, and my parents refused to get me new ones. So I accepted coffee against my better judgment. We got together at this Starbucks close to my workplace. Seeing her after all this time was strange. She still maintained the same warm smile, but she appeared older and had gray hair. Following some awkward small chat about her work and the state of the rest of the extended family, she finally revealed the true reason for her desire to meet your parents or her financial difficulties. She spoke slowly, observing my response as if she was afraid I may blow out or something. About half a year ago, your dad lost his job. I believe he simply couldn't keep up with the younger folks, but they say it was downsizing. Lily, too. She stopped and sighed. She did, however, leave the costly college they were funding. Carleton. It was named, I believe. When Jenny informed me about their financial difficulties, I felt nothing at all. No joy, no sorrow. Nothing compares to learning about strangers on a television program I didn't watch. They have been inquiring about me recently, she remarked. I wondered how I knew. It was more like asking if I had any money they could borrow. I assured her that everything was okay and that I was still working at my usual job. Presumably believing I had been living beneath a bridge, she was relieved. She then proposed that I attend Christmas, said that getting back in touch may be pleasant. My entire being wanted to say, hell no, take off, avoid falling back into their poisonous nonsense. But a small part of me, that tiny child, was the portion that might still be recalled. She is desperate to get her parents' approval, questioned if they had changed at all. I was also a little intrigued. After all this time, what would they say to me? I'll give it some thought, I responded, which, beyond what I ought to have pledged. Jenny changed the topic and appeared content with it. I assumed that would be the end of it when we finished our coffees and gave each other an awkward farewell embrace. However, a week later, I didn't recognize the number that called on my phone. I almost didn't respond, but I did so because I thought I could get a call regarding an investment property. Is that you, Sarah? Her voice gave me a strange chill because it sounded just like what I recalled. Yes, it's me. Flatly, I replied. Oh, my love, you've been sorely missed, she said, as if some strange accident had separated us. And not because I was physically evicted from the house for shutting the door to my bedroom. Jenny claimed to have seen you. You are employed at Davis. That's fantastic. We hope you will join us for Christmas dinner. Everyone will be present. I felt like throwing up at the phony joy in her voice. Mom, why now? I inquired icily. After all these years, why get in touch with me? Don't be like that, Sarah. Family is family. It's water under the bridge. Lily is always inquiring about you. What a blatant falsehood that was. It was nearly comical. Lily hadn't cared about me since we were young children. It's likely that she was just running out of people to cheat on after her college plans went awry. Does she? Not hiding, I said. How doubtful I was. Naturally, Sarah, she's grown up so much. Each of us has had time to think. Say that you will attend Christmas, please. For us all, it would mean a great deal. I consented, against all reason and instincts for self-preservation. Perhaps the loneliness was speaking, that emptiness that never quite went away. Or perhaps all I wanted was some sort of resolution, or wishing against all logic that they had changed. Or perhaps I simply wanted to stop feeling so empty. All right, I'll attend the Christmas meal. Oh, that's fantastic news. I'll prepare your preferred dessert. Is chocolate cake still something you enjoy? It nearly made me chuckle. Since I was around 10 years old, apple pie has been my favorite dessert. Even the most basic information about me was unknown to her. I answered, yes, chocolate cake is okay. There's no need correcting her. Feeling strange, I hung up. We're in a bit of a bind later, Sarah, honey. Trying to sound informal, Mom said. Lily's student loan mortgages and the mortgages underlying them. And there it was, the true cause of the family get-together. Not that we're sorry or that we miss you. As parents, we were awful. Just. We require funds. What is the amount? I inquired icily. We could get through this month on just $3,000, she remarked, attempting to sound both entitled and needy, as if I owed them. Naturally, we would reimburse you when your father secures a new job. I considered my investing account, which is currently valued at over $7 million. Those winters back, I considered freezing in my automobile. When I was actually homeless, I considered them converting my bedroom into Lily's hobby room. I felt like telling her to burn in hell. Another part, though, was curious to see how this would turn out. Would they be appreciative? Really? Would they finally think I was worth it? Or would they simply accept and ask for more? I said I could send $1,500. Right now, that's all I have to spare. An outright falsehood. Of course. However, I was curious to see how they would respond to receiving less than what they had requested. Despite her disappointment, she accepted. That would be useful. Thank you, Sarah. I told myself it was only an experiment to monitor them, so I set up a monthly transfer. To be honest, though, a shattered part of me still longed for them to see me, at last, to treat me as though I mattered, and to be proud of me at last. The next day, the transfer was completed. Mom gave me a quick and somewhat chilly call to thank me. She seemed irritated that I hadn't given her the entire amount she requested. Dad never gave me a call to express gratitude. Lily texted me a couple times during the following several weeks. Extremely phony, extremely kind, and curious about my well-being. She claimed to have missed her big sister. I didn't say much. She never once expressed regret for helping to have me expelled. Never addressed the wounds from the past. Simply pretended that we were close friends who had fallen out of touch. Oh my God, did you hear her SMS one night? Did Dad's vehicle break down? Already, they are barely able to pay their expenses. And we are all under a lot of stress right now. To the face, the indication was as subtle as a brick. I didn't answer. I became increasingly nervous as Christmas drew nearer. What did I enter? Was I a fool? Was this a complex ruse to get more money from me? I was interested, but I nearly canceled a dozen times. When they saw that I wasn't the shattered, desperate girl they'd tossed aside, I wanted to see their expressions. I had a steady career and a home of my own. Without them, I was getting along just fine. At least that would be gratifying. I spent about 15 minutes sitting in my car outside my parents' house on Christmas Day, truly considering leaving. I eventually had myself get out and make my way to the door, even though my stomach was in knots. I nearly turned around and walked out 3 times while I was standing on their doorstep, but I rang the doorbell instead. Mom, appearing older but much the same, opened it. Sarah, you arrived. She hugged me awkwardly, and I didn't embrace her back, simply stood still as she encircled me with her arms. There were several relatives in the home that I hardly recalled. Aunt Jenny smiled at me from the other side of the room. The others simply appeared uneasy, as if they were at a loss for words while speaking to me. I got strange, pathetic looks from some cousins I hadn't seen since I was a teenager, as if I were some kind of charity case they had to be kind to. Spread out on the couch, Lily was browsing through her phone. She had gained around 30 pounds since I last saw her, and she had the perpetually irritated look of someone who is accustomed to always getting what they want. Her eyes furrowed at the sight of me. Look who it is, then, still dressed in the same flimsy attire, she remarked, glancing at my attire. I was dressed in pants and a basic sweatshirt. It's not elegant, but it's also not rags. It's good to see you, Lily. Flatly, I replied. Dad leaned back in his chair and gave a curt nod. According to your mother, you have been providing financial support for us. That's excellent. I simply nodded. I had no idea why they were being so kind. Yes, but for the past 3 months, I had been providing them $1,500 a month. I wanted to know whether it would affect our relationship in any way. This strange show was dinner. Mom pretended to serve me first while remarking on how great it was to have the entire family together once more. However, Lily was mentioned in every other phrase. Lily nearly completed her degree. She's simply taking a brief respite, you know. Lily has received many job offers. All she has to do is wait for the ideal moment. Every time money came up, I could see Lily eyeing me intently. For example, when Dad said their roof needed to be repaired, or when Lily's mother mentioned that she would need a new automobile for job interviews. She was observing my responses, most likely attempting to determine my precise financial situation. I simply nodded compassionately, as any regular person with a small salary would, keeping my face neutral. Mom brought out a chocolate dessert after supper. I created your fave. With pride, she made the announcement. I didn't realize that since I was 10 apple pie had been my favorite. After thanking her, I grabbed a tiny piece. Lily took over at that point. How's that little flat of yours in that dubious area doing, Sarah? It's okay, I said. That vintage Toyota is still in operation. By now, it must have accumulated 200,000 kilometers. She forced a sarcastic little smile onto her lips. That kind of thing. It must be challenging. At your age, barely making ends meet, she added. You're only a desk drone at the age of 32. I sensed the direction of this. Despite the fact that she was the one who left college and was living with our parents, she was attempting to humiliate me in front of the entire family in order to improve her own image. I get by, I said plainly. There was no humor in her laughter. Yeah, you're doing so well that you can only afford to give $1,500 a month to support Mom and Dad. Are you aware of how offensive that is? The amount they requested was $3,000. They want $3,000. Aunt Jenny attempted to step in. That's not proper dinner talk, Lily. No, I'd want to know. Lily interrupted her. Why is she being so frugal when our parents are having financial difficulties? We could lose this house when my college loans start to weigh heavily on me. Mom seemed uneasy. Please, Lily. Sarah is doing her best to assist. But is she? Lily said more loudly. Take a look at her. Always on the cheap. Always on a tight budget with those cheap haircuts and secondhand clothing. Clearly, she's waiting for us. She's being self-centered, yet she could do more to help. It's pitiful, Lily. That's sufficient. But with little conviction, Dad added. However, Lily was suddenly having success. Sarah, I am aware of how much you earn. Without a doubt, you can afford more than $1,500 a month. You're simply being self-centered. There was silence at the table. I understood that Lily had always planned this ambush. Lily, how much do I make? Calmly, I asked. What? You claim to have researched me. Tell everyone how much I make, please. She stumbled a little, and then got back on track, similar to $55,000 annually. This implies that you should have a lot of money left over to truly support your family, after taxes and your inexpensive dwelling. Slowly, I nodded. Math is interesting. It's not arithmetic. It's true. She lost her temper. You're waiting for us. While Mom and Dad could lose their house, they're probably saving for some dumb trip. Mom got right in. We don't count on you to fix every issue we have, Sarah. However, if you could perhaps provide a bit more assistance. And there it was, the entire arrangement. Lily had persuaded them that I was being frugal by withholding funds that I might have readily provided. What do you know? I said, getting to my feet. I had to get my laptop out of my car. I have something I would want to show you all. I grabbed my laptop and headed outside to my car. Lily had a pleased expression on her face when I returned, most likely believing she had shamed me into giving her more cash. After I took a seat, I turned on my laptop and went into my investing account. I then rotated the screen in their direction to display the balance, $7,243,158.65. I've constructed this. You all assumed that I was working at an office job to make ends meet. I've done this without any assistance from any of you. The quiet was overwhelming. Mom's face turned pale. Dad's jaw dropped. But Lily appeared to have been smacked. Her gaze shifted from the TV to me and back again. Lily was really perplexed. That is, That isn't feasible. You shop at Target and drive a Toyota. Stage it, I smiled. Yes, since I don't treat money as monopoly cash like other people do. You see, I discovered that it's better to invest in my future rather than leave a costly university and hope that someone else would pay for it. Mom put on this strange, excessively enthusiastic smile, as if her brain had just reset. This is really fantastic news, Sarah. We knew you would succeed. It was always said that you will succeed. Dad gave a bobblehead nod. My daughter is that. Had a keen commercial sense from the beginning. Sure, Dad. Last week, you were most likely simply telling your neighbor how proud you were of me. When requesting whether they were aware of a reputable pawn business, I could almost hear the arithmetic problems running through Lily's mind as she continued to stare at the screen. Her eyes gleamed with the unique type of avarice that befits a gold digger documentary. When she finally glanced up, she said, "We're family, Sarah," in a nice, gentle voice that sounded like she was trying out for a Disney princess part. Family helps family, and I've been struggling a lot lately. Family, oh. I cocked my head. It's funny. I don't recall being family while you were redesigning my bedroom and I was freezing to death in my vehicle, or when you lied and got me expelled when I was 17. That collective embrace must have been missed. Years ago, Lily complained. I was only a child. Lil, you were 15. I tilted my head in agreement. You're old enough to see the difference between supporting your mother and using me as a prop for your personal benefit. But congratulations. You did a fantastic job. I went to my parents, and you also chose to trust her instead of me. No inquiries. I was thrown away like leftovers from the previous week. Oh, now that you believe there is money, I'm suddenly family again. I didn't even check to see whether I lived. It's touching. Mom started crying right away. Amazing. To be honest, we were wrong. She gave a whiff. However, we can resolve this. We can reunite as a true family. I laughed. Cold and slow. A true family? Yes, as nothing shouts love. For example, asking for money after 8 years and then coming up for show. After taking out my phone, I stopped the monthly transfer and launched my banking app. That's right, I'm sorry. You'll probably need to find someone else to take advantage of. I'm finished. My tolerance was outstripped by Lily's charming performance. You are a self-centered jerk. I felt perplexed, as if I needed a moment to comprehend the audacity after everything we had done for you. All that you have done for me, such as ejecting me. Before my side of the bed was even cold, you transformed my bedroom into your painting studio. Or was it the years I lived off of instant noodles and library Wi-Fi, with no apologies and radio silence? She opened her lips to speak, but all that came out was a little spluttering that was about as much as I had anticipated. With a loud snap, I closed my laptop and got up. I'm going. Don't give me a call. Please refrain from texting me. Actually, behave like I passed away. Everyone will find it easier. I was halfway to the door when my mother rushed over. As if she could literally drag me back into their web, her hand was grabbing for me. Hold on, Sarah. We are your parents. You owe us. I turned and grinned icily. When you threw me out like trash, I owed you nothing. Now, I owe you even less. Never one to let me down, Dad called me by name. You're a little ungrateful. I swung back so quickly that he stopped talking in the middle. Why are you not grateful? For getting expelled. While you were redecorating my room, I was cold in my car. For 8 years, until my bank account became interesting, I was neglected and thrown away. Just guilty, blank glances without apologies. I opened the door, closed it behind me, and walked out. Like a door slamming on a whole chapter of my life, I felt something inside of me click into place. I looked back once as I walked to my car. Lily was at the window, observing me. Her look was a strange concoction of fright, anger, and disbelief. The expression one gets when they learn. Their final card was stolen by the ATM. I had just entered my flat when my phone began to explode. Lily kept making calls and leaving obnoxious voicemails. You believe that you are now so much superior to us? And phony ones who apologize. I apologize for my anger. I was just taken aback. Mom sent over 50 texts, ranging from guilt trips to outright requests for money. Dad's messages were the most menacing, but he left less. Discussing my remorse for this choice and my legal responsibilities. At night, I blocked all of their numbers, but it was only the first step. Lily was parked in her car outside my apartment complex when I got home from the gym 3 days after Christmas. She leaped out and came running over as soon as she spotted me. Can we have a conversation, Sarah? Desperate, she asked. I apologize for Christmas. Simply put, I was taken aback. I tried to get past her by saying, there's nothing to talk about. She took hold of my arm. You're not understanding. I'm in serious danger. I have nothing to do with the student loans. For her, I completed. Release my arm. Her expression transformed in an instant. The same cruel grin from my early years took the place of the faux kindness. Didn't you always believe that you were superior to me? Even as children. And now you believe that you may disregard your family since you are wealthy? Since the day you lied and got me expelled, Lily, we haven't been family. God, oh God, are you still preoccupied with that? She gave a smirk. It was a single little falsehood. How could I have predicted that they would go nuclear? Her total lack of regret left me speechless as I looked at her. You were well aware of what you were doing. You desired my room. You received all the attention you desired. Well done. I had no idea you would become homeless. I knew she was lying, even if she protested. In any case, take a look at how well you did. Now you're wealthy. Thank you, none of you. Then her face became hideous. What do you know? Both parents are correct. You owe us. And we'll force you to assist us if you don't want to. Is that dangerous? It's a pledge. Dad is already speaking with attorneys. It is legally required of you to provide for your parents as they age. We refer to it as filial obligation. Check it out. In fact, I laughed. Advise Dad to avoid spending money on attorneys. Only in some states, and under extremely particular conditions, do those laws apply. And in this case, none of them apply. We'll investigate that. She lost her temper. You're a selfish bitch, and I'm telling everyone about it. Everyone will know, including our old pals and the entire family. Proceed. Tell them. I won't provide money to my violent parents, I responded quietly. Inform them that I will not support your dropout lifestyle. Look who is genuinely concerned. When she bounded away, however, their campaign continued. Mom made a passionate Facebook post about her daughter's agonizing decision to leave her suffering family. Dad really sought legal advice, playing the victim, but after learning that he had no legal right to my money, he resorted to threats, claiming that I would be reported to the IRS for concealing assets, which I wasn't. All of the money was legitimate and taxed. That was the last straw for me. I took a leave of absence from work, gave notice at my apartment, and began looking for a place to live in Colorado. I want emotional and physical separation. Discovered a cabin-style home close to a tiny Rockies town. Paid cash for it, packed only the essentials, and departed. I updated my phone number, sent everything by email. The day I took off in my car, it was like my first deep breath in a long time, as if I had finally emerged from the shade that had been cast over me in Colorado. Life began to seem authentic once more. Knowing all too well what it was like to be young and homeless, I helped at a juvenile shelter. Alex and I met there. Be patient and kind. The complete antithesis of anybody I've known in the past. After 6 months of dating, I opened up to him about my family's chaos, my homelessness, and my covert investments. I was afraid he would see me in a new light, but that was all he said. Are you all right? It's not about the cash. It's not about the drama. Only about me. A year later, in front of people who genuinely cared, we were married beside a lake close to our house. To assist children transitioning out of foster care, we established a foundation, ending the circle I was in. And it seemed like everything had gone full circle when our babies, who had been tossed around the system, entered our life. Yes, that's where I am at the